Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us live here today. It's Carolina from Manta, and with me I have Anthony Fazio, our Senior Solution Engineer from Manta. Hello, Anthony.
Thank you, Carolina. Hi, everybody.
And Anthony, he's going to present to you our live demo of Manta for healthcare industry. So he will show you how Manta works and how it can be leveraged in the heavily regulated healthcare sector. We'll also take a closer look at how our customers use automated lineage to adhere to data privacy and regulations, and how to ensure to have accurate reporting and how to safely migrate your data to the cloud. If you have any further questions, please use the chat and we'll make sure to answer all of your questions at the end of the session. Please note that this is not full Manta demo, but rather a quick overview of the main features that Manta has. And if you'd like to have a full demo, you can schedule it at getmanta.com or reach out to me, and I'll make sure to schedule it either with Anthony or with other great engineers we have at Manta. Hey, I think that's everything I need to say at the beginning, and I'll hand it over to you, Anthony.
Thank you very much. So I'll get started now. Welcome, everyone. Anthony Fazio here, Senior Solutions Engineer at Manta. We're sharing a presentation to follow along as some supplementary material and as a guideline, and then we'll cut to the demo and then come back briefly. But if I move forward now, we can get started here. So here's our introduction to Data Lineage. This should set the stage nicely. And as we move forward today, like Carolina had mentioned, around lineage in the context of the healthcare industry. But first of all, we want to understand what this really is and why is it useful? And also some of the difficulties around harnessing it in a meaningful way and in a way that's accurate. So really what it's all about is you want to have full visibility into all of your relevant data sources, the associated flows, the so-called lineage, and the dependencies, both upstream and downstream. In most cases, it's across a number of many disparate technologies. And when you're working with patient data, this requires a great deal of effort, as we know from healthcare institutions. They want to ensure that that data they're working with has known and reliable and trusted origins, which can be very difficult if you have these sort of separate siloed environments and then all of these complicated tangled data connections across these different technologies, as we know. And to help make sense of this complexity and ensure data security, which is very important, more healthcare organizations, as we're seeing, have been carrying out large-scale migrations. So they'll take their existing data applications, for example, to some more modern cloud-hosted solutions. But it's really then like what we're going to be diving into is the process of, like I said before, having actionable automated data lineage and helping these enterprises like the healthcare industry, which is heavily regulated, comply with a lot of the stringent regulations such as GDPR and CCPA. And we'll demonstrate this by illustrating different data flows through various systems from source to target. And also how PII, which is very important, personally identifiable information, is protected, and also understand where it's stored in your systems. So moving on now, what makes data lineage difficult to achieve? Like I mentioned earlier, this is a difficult process. So a comprehensive data lineage approach, it's paramount when doing business in the healthcare sector. Doing lineage is hard, and this is why sometimes companies will try to opt for shortcuts. And because of that, lineage capture and the maintenance of it, or say these migration efforts like we talked about before from ground to cloud, they're not as easy as just a simple lift and shift. And sometimes there's this false notion that exists where you think you can just buy product or maybe adopt some new tools, but there's still many challenges in different facets, which we'll look at today. And that's why quality data lineage is key. And in this slide, we've highlighted some of those difficulties. So for example, like rate of change. As you see, your business can evolve. You'll implement new functionality, different places, and process new and more people, and you'll have them touching different data technologies and resources which you need to know about. Because, for example, if you modify or move data, you need to know this information as quickly as possible. Also, company evolution is a challenge. Maybe you've acquired another vendor or, say, a niche product to roll into your existing suite of products or adopted technologies. You want to understand how to merge the two together or many together and understand what data is actually being utilized. Thus, it makes it harder to understand and trace the relevant data pipelines of interest. And then also something like scope, which we see outlined here. It could go just beyond one source database. It's not as simple as that in most cases, or one particular technology in your ecosystem. You need to understand all of the source and target systems, plus the actors or the employees who are interacting with these different systems. Now we get to the Manta live demonstration portion. I'm going to share Manta demo instance for us to step through. And if you have any questions during this demonstration, please feel free to put them in the chat box. That's part of this meeting utility, the platform that we're using today. So let's share that now. Okay, so I'm sharing out a live Manta instance. And to set the stage here on Manta itself, it's a solution that helps you create a map of your entire data infrastructure in an automated fashion. And I'm going to show you today in this demonstration our ability. It's really the end result of our ability to reverse engineer code, because Manta's core competency, it's laser focused on data lineage. And we find that code is really the most accurate way to understand data flows. So over the course of this, we'll understand better how Manta creates in-depth visibility and transparency for these various flows in your data pipelines. We'll look at several different technologies spanning backgrounds and spaces like databases, ETL platforms, reporting tools. But also you'll see how this will remove the need for sort of manual intervention, and that the process itself is accurate and fully automated. We'll get into some details how Manta actually conducts its scans to cultivate this metadata and lineage, but also how your major lines of business will benefit from this platform and the self-service enablement that comes with it. So this test Manta instance we're looking at right now, we're greeted with our metadata repository here. There's a sampling of technologies that we capture in sort of a lightweight asset catalog. And you'll see things like SQL Server here, Power BI, SSIS, et cetera. This is our metadata library that's been cultivated using Manta's various scanners. And as we know, a major problem in the healthcare industry might arise from, say, your inability to understand the fundamental rights of data subjects that are interacting with your systems or being stored. So say things like right to access or right to erasure, or sometimes as it's known, right to be forgotten. In these cases, healthcare companies have to show some kind of supervisory authority or regulators exactly how it's securing its data. And in worst case scenario situation, as we've seen, sometimes a data breach could occur, and the healthcare provider would have to prove that it did everything possible to stop the breach. So with something like this here, this comprehensive catalog and the lineage benefits we'll be looking at, data lineage is a nice way of showing that, and it can draw out the end-to-end mapping of those data flows. So you understand all the movements within, say, like a BI platform and your analytics environments. So we're going to start with that end-to-end mapping. So in this catalog, we can browse through it manually. As such, if I were to expand this, we can step through and see the assets here. Or we can search it. Say there was a table of interest that we wanted to scrutinize, say with this patient dimension table. It's a table derived from Microsoft SQL Server. I can pull this into Manta as my selected element and visualize. And now we'll see the complete end-to-end pipeline from source to target. So from an upstream perspective, we can see here what's sourcing the patient dimension table, where is it coming from, and then where are its fields going? Where do they travel and disseminate downstream here to the right, along with all of the detailed attribute or column level information. This is something that Manta does universally across the scanners, so we get down to the same gritty level of granularity. And not only is it nice to have just as a comprehensive metadata catalog, but you can perform the lineage tracing at this very same fine level. So to do this, say we wanted to understand the story associated with one of these fields here in this patient dimension table, say like family name. If I click this, Manta locks it in as my selected element, and we can see all of the upstream dependencies. Where is this family name field coming from? But then where is it flowing? Where does it land downstream? And we can see that this is actually a pretty critical table, and that it's sourcing the fields across 3 disparate reports, but also across several different disparate technologies, such as SSRS, Power BI, and Tableau, reflected here downstream in these reporting entities. So not only is this database table sourcing multiple reports, like I said, it spans different technologies. And this highlights the significance of not just understanding one source technology or environment, or say one source database like SQL Server, but also just the impact that one small table could have, and the drastic impact that, say, if you had failed to migrate this, could have on your critical end user reporting here downstream. Now, for example, we had a large customer in the healthcare space, and their project managers and personnel in that company, and say the upper management roles, they were relying on a series of reports and dashboards daily to make a lot of major consequential business decisions. But they really had no idea how the numbers were being calculated or where they were coming from an upstream perspective. And because of that, no one in the company was really able to answer their questions with any kind of real certainty or in a reasonable amount of time. And this drastically undermined their trust in the data. With something like this now, you would have more confidence when it comes to reporting the relationships and, again, the disparate data flows to, say, your authorities or any sort of regulatory practices. Now, for the next thing I'd like to talk about, we'll look at a separate lineage visualization. We can talk about sort of the struggles around GDPR compliance, because, again, this ties into tracking customer data across multiple databases or different source systems. And then you can think about another large problem in the healthcare space, data anonymity, along with personal identifiable information, like I mentioned before, what's commonly referred to as PII, and those data elements which can lead to the identifiable, sort of relevance of specific people. So because of this, healthcare companies, they have to identify those locations where the sensitive data is being stored, and also the relationships between that data. So what Manta does to help mitigate this is something called active tags. So if we generate a new visualization now, I can take a critical, say, customer's report. This is an end user facing report here, which we see has been appended with this PII tag, which we'll get into the details of momentarily. So I could take this customer's report as the genesis of my lineage visualization, or even just one of the embedded elements in the report, like this client data set. And if we kick off this visualization in Manta, we see this entity reflected downstream, but also then where it's coming from upstream. What's sourcing this critical report? And when I flesh it out, we see a series of these active tags that I mentioned previously. So what does this mean? So this active tags functionality we see here with these colored icons, this grew out of sort of the increasing need for industries such as healthcare to adhere to growing regulatory requirements, things that we've talked about a bit, like HIPAA or GDPR, CCPA. And these active tags, they serve as specialized indicators to call attention to specific assets that you've captured, these different metadata entities, not only in the visualization, but also, as we saw before, in the metadata repository. And popular use cases for adopting these tags, they include sensitivity and data quality metrics with ratings, or just tagging personally identifiable information. So you can see that reflected here. So anything that's a personally identifiable field, we've appended in Manta with this PII, this purple tag, such as date of birth or full name, customer name, and then these data quality scores, which we can see with the orange and red active tag here, abbreviated DQ. And the major use cases for these active tags and why they're useful, like we said, it's around sensitive data. So you want to highlight, you want to pinpoint that privacy data in the context of these larger lineage flows, but also more easily see where that privacy data is flowing and any sort of potential downstream exposures. Also, the other major piece with these DQ tags are these data quality metrics. So we can more easily prioritize data quality issues for resolution, but also confirm the best places in the data pipeline for addressing the various data quality issues. And we see they can be captured here, at the various database tables that we scan, but also across your stored procedures and any other entities in the environment in Manta's lineage capturing. So now, beyond active tags, the next thing I want to talk about is, as we've covered here, patient data requires a lot of effort from healthcare institutions to sort of maintain and take care of. And because of that, you want predictable and traceable, trusted origins. And to fight this complexity, ensure security of this data, we've seen healthcare organizations increasingly migrating, say, their old deprecated data applications now to cloud and more modern solutions. So in Manta, to help mitigate this and track these changes over time, we have something called revisions and revision comparison. So each and every single time you run a scan in Manta, it's held onto as what we call a revision, which is like a snapshot in time. You can jump back to these previous revisions or scans using the drop-down menu here on the top right. And we see the timestamp information is appended to know exactly when that scan was conducted. So if we click on an older revision now, we've bounced back to revision 8, and we see the scope of our metadata repository has, again, obviously grown. And this is nice. It's sort of a time machine to see how your technologies have evolved, and you can render the same sort of lineage visualizations as we saw previously. But what's more powerful than that is, like I've said, you can actually actively compare and contrast revisions right here in Manta's viewer. So to do this, let's hit the compare revisions button. And now you can lock in an older revision on the left here. We could take something like revision 9, which was run in November of 2018, and compare it to our more contemporary revision from October 2020. And for continuity's sake, we could take that same customer's report we looked at before, and this will kick off our flow. And now, using careful color coding, Manta will show us what has remained the same in this pipeline, but then what might have changed. So here's that critical customer's report downstream, and we can see the upstream dependencies, where it's coming from. There's some SSIS entities here, SQL Server database elements, Informatica Power Center workflows, but ultimately a source Oracle database. And anything that we see here highlighted in gray or black is metadata and lineage that has remained exactly the same. But as we can see, there's some highlighting going on here. And if I expand this, we can do further investigation to see what Manta has detected in terms of changes in the environment across these two separate scans. And if we flesh this out and can continue our analysis, we can see here at the source Oracle database level, we have this particular table, CRM client, and 3 of its fields, date birth, name first, and name last, have been renamed to B date, F name, and L name, respectively. And then obviously we can see how these continue to propagate downstream through this Informatica Power Center workflow, all the way down into our critical customers report. And the convention here is anything that has been removed or changed will be calibrated in this red highlighting. And anything that's been newly introduced will be shown in green, whether this is a metadata element or it's an associated lineage flow. And this isn't just something that we'll do with database systems. This is universal across all of the scanners and the different technologies. It could be for an entire report that's been newly introduced or removed from a pipeline, for example, or say an ETL process or a workflow. Now, tying this into the migrations and the healthcare industry, like we talked about, we've had a customer in the same industry. They were migrating their old Oracle database solution. It was about 20 years old, to a modern cloud data warehouse like Snowflake. And due to the iterative nature of these Manta scans that we've seen, how we hold on to them, the precise timestamp info and the ability to compare what has changed, this is helpful in seeing what needed to be migrated, but also what they were able to decommission or leave behind in the migration process. They were also able to leverage the Manta API, specifically the query API, which is a more customizable and programmatic way of stepping through Manta scans. What we've seen here largely today are these visual aids on an ad hoc basis, which is nice, but it's not always the most feasible if you're dealing with a very large environment or, say, a very large data pipeline or flow. So what they did to save time was leveraging the API, they were able to export all of Manta's cultivated metadata and lineage. And it was faster than a visualization, like I said before, because it was very large in scope. And because of this, they were able to get down to the nitty gritty and analyze the complexity of their various database transformations, like their Oracle stored procedures and functions they were using previously. And looking at the relevant sources and targets of those stored procs and what they were touching, they were able to categorize which ones were just facilitating the one-to-one direct data moves, like we see here. That's Manta's default paradigm for this lineage, versus the ones which were actually transforming the data. So those higher complexity ones. And by categorizing them, they were then able to better understand the scope of what needed to be rewritten to adhere to the new Snowflake solution versus the previous conventions in Oracle before the migration. So let's jump back now just to cap this off with the PowerPoint presentation we were looking at. I'm going to share the presentation again. And to get more into the specifics of how Manta is actually working, like I said, it's a platform that's working to create a map of your data infrastructure. And we classify Manta because of that as a unified data lineage platform, because it's a solution that grew out of all of the ongoing challenges in the realm of lineage and the data lineage collection space. Because as we know, as more complex logic is embedded by companies, such as in their SQL code and any other things like their reporting mechanisms or ETL processes, that leads to harder lineage to make sense of and decipher. So that's where Manta fits in. And like I said before, it harvests your metadata and data and cultivates this lineage and its functionality across a growing number of technologies. We have an increasing number of scanners across these different subject areas. And not only do we carry out this data lineage profiling at will, but we can also hold on to it, and you can see how things are inevitably evolving over time through those snapshots and revision comparison, for example. So the crux of how this works under the hood, we can see this three-step process. Manta will connect to your various technology sources to download the code that's of relevance that you've incorporated in the scope of the scan. And we're only ever parsing code, source data, and those data values themselves are never touched. And what we do is we go line by line, and this is where the heavy lifting comes in. We go line by line to parse and analyze all of that code to document the consistent attribute or column level lineage, like we saw before, which is very useful in not only having a comprehensive metadata catalog, but it also lets you conduct more in-depth technical impact and root cause analysis. All of that harvested metadata then that we hold on to, it's stored in a graph database, which then we're able to present in our native visualization, which we saw in the demo. We call this the Manta Flow Viewer. Or you also have the ability to export this along to independent data catalogs or data governance solutions of your choosing. And the reason why we provide this is just to give you a more comprehensive overview, and they tend to work together as complementary solutions. Manta's laser focused on data lineage, as where those other solutions are, like I said, they're more focused on data cataloging and governance needs. And Manta is efficient in that it can be executed in an end-to-end automated fashion. You can kick off the scans at your leisure, but they can also be automated at the frequency of your choosing, using just an out-of-the-box OS scheduler, for example. And then talking about some of the key features and benefits of data lineage. This is really just a summary of the major benefits that a comprehensive lineage solution provides, but highlighting the major Manta-specific benefits and differentiators that we've touched upon in today's demo. So the fully automated nature of it, we talked about the Manta query API specifically. Also our capacity to capture its data transformations and active tagging, which we saw in the viewer. Our paradigm for direct lineage, so the one-to-one direct data flows, but then also indirect lineage, where Manta can capture lineage relationships for some of the more innocuous relationships in a flow. Say like you have embedded filtering conditions or SQL case statements or where clauses. Manta can show that in tandem with those direct one-to-one data moves. Also, our historical lineage capability. We talked about Manta holding on to those previous scans as revisions, but also your ability to actively compare and contrast them to see what has changed or remained the same. And then how this creates accurate analysis and an overall view of your data lineage journey. And then finally, just a sampling of our customers. It's a wide variety in different sectors. This is only a small sampling, but as you can see, it's a broad variety of subject areas such as finance, banking, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing. And they've all adopted Manta for the litany of benefits. As you can imagine, industry of all sectors and sizes have needs around data governance, achieving regulatory compliance, but then also technical data ops initiatives and data migration efforts. And that caps off the webinar today. If you want to get more information, you can visit our website at getmanta.com or send us an email at the address listed here, manta@getmanta.com.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Anthony, for the lovely presentation. I think you covered the most you could in almost in half an hour. So thank you very much for that. If anyone would like to know more information about Manta or want to get a full demo, please don't mind to reach out to me, or as you saw at our email, manta@getmanta.com. And with that, I would conclude it for today. Thank you very much and have a lovely day, everyone. Bye.